It's so nice to see you here tonight. My name is Concetta Civilano-Perna, representing the Dante Alighieri Society of Sydney, which organized tonight's event in collaboration with the Italian Institute of Culture. Before proceeding, I would like to remind us that in the spirit of reconciliation, the Dante Alighieri Society of Sydney and the Italian Institute of Culture acknowledge the traditional custodians of the country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respect to their elders and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders peoples. It is a privilege to welcome you all for this very special occasion, marking the launch of Dr. Alessandra Pucci's latest work, Arguably Prescient, Occasional Writings of a Parallel Life, 1990-2025. A kind of memoir that spans 35 years of scientific engagement, cultural observation, and advocacy for bringing science into industry and the public sphere. I would like to extend my sincere gratitude to the Italian Consul General, Dr. Gianluca Rubagotti, for his support in his role as Reggente of the Italian Institute of Culture until the appointment of the new director. I warmly invite Dr. Rubagotti to share a few words with us. Thank you.
Thank you, President, and welcome to all our guests here. As the President just said, I'm wearing a double hat. Besides being the Consul General, I'm in charge of the running of the Cultural Institute here for at least 6 months. So I'm very happy that one of the first events that we are hosting is a collaboration with the Dante Alighieri Society, because we believe that Italy is a strong country, but we have different actors involved, and when we can play together, we can play in a more effective way. I am also thankful to our main guest, Dr. Pucci, for gifting me a special version of the book. And of course, with the other panelists, I'm very excited and waiting to hear, because here we have an example of trying to put together these intertwining flows, literature, science, and this helps in the promotion also of a cultural identity. So I don't want to take too much of your time, and I give the floor back to Concetta and to our special guest. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rubagotti. Now, allow me to say a few words about Dr. Alex Pucci. Alex has been a scientist for more than 50 years. After taking science degrees from the Italian University, Professor Emerita, Carolyn, Geczy, AM. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for the introduction, Dr. Rubagotti, Fred, Alex, Fred, ladies and gentlemen. Buonasera a tutti. And I apologise that my Italian goes no further than that. It's a privilege to have been invited here tonight to tell you a little bit about Alex. We are both biomedical scientists, but we have approached our fields from quite different perspectives. I'm the type that beavered away in the laboratory to get answers to questions in the lab, led by my findings, whereas you, Alex, have been a true pioneer in the Australian biotechnology arena. I met Alex in 1980 at the Colling Institute at Sydney's Royal North Shore Hospital. This was established in 1920. A new building was funded by a bequest from Mrs. Colling in 1930. It's affiliated with the University of Sydney and is the oldest running medical research institute in New South Wales. I met Alex in the lab around 1980. She was examining intestinal cancer cells. During my postdoctoral research, I had devised ways to prepare antibodies to rare proteins that are involved in inflammation. Our interests were similar, and our contacts grew, particularly around discussions about the exciting possibilities that the new technologies in production of monoclonal antibodies may provide. Alex had an unmistakable European elegance, and her clothes were impeccable and enviable to me. But she had a serious commitment to science and its outcomes. Her experience overseas had convinced her that generation of cell clones that could produce a single, highly specific antibody would be more accurate in design of specific diagnostic tests and as potential treatments for autoimmune diseases and cancer. Now, Alex had a magnetic presence. Her accent was the kind that could convince a room of Australian scientists of her vision. And this she did, drawing experts from key laboratories, including Professor Ian Mackenzie of the University of Melbourne, Professor Graham Mitchell from the Walter Eliza Hall Institute, and Professor Kevin Lafferty from ANU, and myself, to comprise a board to oversee the science that would underpin a new venture never attempted in Australia. But Alex, together with her late husband, the charismatic Gino, who had experience in business, attracted private investors. Efforts to lobby government were fierce. I recall several meetings with parliamentarians, including Barry Jones, Kim Beazley and John Button, at which Alex outlined how she could begin a new venture in biotechnology and how this would impact Australia. The Australian monoclonal development into laboratories in Artarmon were opened by Michael McKellar, Commonwealth Minister for Health, in March 1982. In 1983, John Button informed Alex that they would receive the Department of Industry grant she had applied for to underpin the young company. Here's a photo of Alex and myself with Eunice, Dr. Eunice Farron, and that was on my wedding day in 1985. And here's a photo of Alex, Gino, and myself and Kelvin Hopper trying to persuade the Japanese, and obviously it was pretty successful. Now I'd like to turn to some other snippets of my life with Alex. Alex is one of the few Australian women to have been awarded a prestigious Eisenhower Fellowship and all the other awards that were listed earlier. The Eisenhower Fellowship is a non-profit US organisation formed to promote global understanding by encouraging exceptional mid-career professionals to go beyond their existing networks and to collaborate with other like-minded leaders to create a more peaceful, prosperous and just world. This is a picture of myself with Phoebe and her husband after she received the Eisenhower Fellowship. Alex is a superb cook and entertainer. Her elegant table has always been surrounded by interesting guests who provided robust conversations, although I didn't always know what was being said. The most satisfying experience around the year 2000 was being included in a group that Alex named the Lumiere. This included Janet, Julia, Chiara, Jean-Paula, Brooke, Sylvia, the late Ilaria, and myself. But I'm still not sure if she thought that we were special moonbeams or where the name came from. Alex has always been interested in writing stories, and her mission was to have us all describe our lives, our beginnings, important events and feelings. I don't know that we'd had the same commitment to writing, but I loved the discussions. These were illuminating and inspiring afternoons. As up until then, I had never spent time with such a diverse group of interesting women outside of a research setting. I recently asked Alex if she had a copy of the things that I had written, but she no longer had it. So I'm not sure what happened to our stories, but maybe this is going to be the subject of another book.
Why not? Why not?
So for many years now, we've met somewhere for lunch. We chat about our families, interesting new science, and life generally. And I hope that we can do that for years to come. Alex, you have had the intellect, the courage and determination to travel a journey that few women have made. You had flair and confidence and were sharp enough to recognise potential. You've moved between laboratories, continents, boardrooms, lobbying sessions and wonderful lunches. You've been committed to translation of research and recognising the knowledge and opportunities that science can give Australia and worldwide. And now you've written a kind of a memoir in another book. You're not just a pioneer, but a woman who has lived her life like a perfectly constructed sentence. Elegant, impactful, and impossible to forget. I'm privileged to have shared this journey with you and wish you all the very best for Arguably Prescient.
Ladies and gentlemen, signore e signori, I will be giving this brief speech in English, but I do wish to apologise for not being able to give it in Italian, and I can at least apologise in Italian. Benvenuti e grazie per aver dato il vostro grandissimo sostegno alla mamma, non solo come amici, e molti siete amici, ma anche per aver seguito la sua carriera con grande attenzione già da qualche anno. A questo punto sarà meglio che ritorno all'inglese per fare qualche osservazione a proposito di questo libro. Purtroppo il mio vocabolario italiano è adolescente. Per rispettare la grande società Dante Alighieri, l'Istituto di Cultura, dovrei parlarvi a un livello un pochino più alto. I thank guests and friends for their generosity in supporting Mum over the years, and with the greatest respect for the Dante Alighieri Society and Italian Institute of Culture, I'd better give this speech in English, or otherwise the content would be too basic. Thank you, Dr. Geczy. Very kind words. My name is Federico Pucci. I'm the final warm-up act before Mum, the esteemed author, Alessandra, who we've all been waiting for, will come up to the mic. As Presidente Perna said, I've got a reputation for maintaining a certain objectivity vis-à-vis my mother, using humour as the main tool and a gentle weapon. Now, you may have been intrigued as to what she meant. It is indeed an encrypted message, and I'm here to decrypt it, to reveal something of some significance, which you might even be called a scoop this evening. So, in fact, the burden of truth has been bearing down on my mother and I for a very long time, and we thought this exclusive gathering would be the place to reveal that the ghostwriter of her scientific writing, the genius, if you like, that has attracted you here, is in fact me. My mother is just the pretty face. Today's readership demands a pretty face, and it's all about marketing and teamwork. So, look, Alessandra Pucci is not only a pretty face, and is indeed the author. And I'm here to tell the story of how she has travelled a very long road to be here tonight. We should start in the 1940s in East Africa, where she was born. She lived in Asmara, the capital of Eritrea. She lived there 0 to 18 in an Italian colonial community where her father ran a weekly newspaper in what had become British territory. The first major event in her life was her spectacularly winning a scholarship to Pisa University to commence her brilliant career in the sciences. Fast forward to the 1980s in Australia, where Senator John Button and Prime Minister Bob Hawke asked her to be a government advisor on science policy. The work she did for that extraordinary government, plus her work in founding and running as CEO of 2 listed companies, eventuated in her being awarded an AO and Centenary Medal, as Gisante kindly mentioned, and the Centenary Medal being given to her by John Howard, who's no friend of Hawke and Keating. As the Brits would say, she is no slouch. But I do wish to shift momentarily from the ceremonial to the personal, and I want to add something very personal. I had a brother who died tragically months before I was born. I get upset at being called an only child, so I'm telling the story about my mother on behalf of both of us, because Daniela is always with me, and I need him by my side on this important occasion to talk about our mother. I was raised by my mother to the tune of 80%, we say, the remaining proverbial 20% by my beloved late dad. My father was a big influence on me, and will roll in his grave at the measly 20%. He was outrageously well read, and would be delighted to see here in the audience my son Jimmy, a writer, here with his writer friends, and Leo, a musician and sound producer up especially from Melbourne. My father was colto. I mention him tonight because actually he was above all a Tuscan. Now, many Australians know more about Tuscan villages and villas than me, but you may or may not know that at the heart of the Tuscan, whether it's Dante Alighieri himself, or Machiavelli or Galileo, is a wonderful rascal. Quite different to the larrikin, but similar in his pernicious pursuit of banter in the name of spirited entertainment. Think of the Tuscan comedian Roberto Benigni. But there is a point to this. You see, on the home front, my mother had to put up with a lot of Tuscan banter. To my Tuscan friends who would come over unannounced, this esteemed career woman was simply la Puccetta. Puccetta is a diminutive of Pucci, a typical Tuscan rascal move. So let's just dwell on this for a moment. She's left her family behind in Africa, running bravely into the den of Tuscan rascals, survived a personal tragedy of losing her son, somehow found the strength of character and determination to carve out a career in science and industry and government, and the Tuscan chaps carry on with all that. Perhaps it has something to do with being a woman, possibly. When people say to me, affirmative action has run long enough now, I think, no, give it a little longer. Yet here I am, trying to redeem myself in front of you with these words, while the truth behind the scenes continued to be different. Dr Pucci thought she was off the hook when my dear dad died 24 years ago, but unfortunately he passed the baton on to me. She's put up with banter from me ever since. You see, scientists, like lawyers, are easy targets because they're so earnest. But has that all gotten in a little long in the tooth? Well, I do make sure I keep her strength of character alive and fresh every day. I'm a trainer, you see, with tough love every day for my long-suffering mum. This unusual mother-son dynamic now sets the scene and allows me to tell you the main insight of the story of my mother, which is the fact that she's not a mother. She is a scienziata mamma, scientist mother. She says so herself. She says this to break through the Tuscan idiocy that she has to put up with. When she's had enough, she declares, "You must listen to me because I am scienziata mamma." This is why this is the first time I've ever been invited to introduce a publication of hers. She's not only a writer on the history and philosophy of science, but a former CEO of 2 listed companies. And I've not met one of those, a CEO who likes dissent in the ranks. I jest because the real reason for not involving me personally, previously, is that I'm no help to her on matters of science. She's scienziata mamma and science is her realm. The gap in understanding between us. She shared the whole idea and impetus of this publication with me from the get-go. I was supportive, although my initial reaction was that I could not pigeonhole what the collection really stood for as one coherent publication. That was until I began to see certain themes and connectivity emerge between one writing and the next within the collection. And then I saw the prescience. She had written way back then about things that eventuated much later. She was prescient, and she was showing this in her arguments as contained in these writings. So she was arguably prescient. How prescient? Well, in 2018, she published a book called Devolution, an extract of which is included in this book today, where she warned of the dangers of social media to adolescent brains. She'd been researching this book for 5 years. So we're going back to the mid-2010s, predating Trump 1.0, Cambridge Analytica, Facebook appearances before Congress, etc. But her book does a lot more than predict manipulative algorithms. It's a deep study of the formation of adolescent brains, which continues to be of interest to anthropologists, neurologists, and technology observers. The arguably, of course, is a double entendre that was intended to water down the potential perception that we were arrogantly declaring that the writings were prescient. No, they're not definitely prescient, they're arguably prescient. You, the reader, can make up your own mind. But the language is funny, and my sons thought that we came across as arrogant, which is my fault. Now, it remains true that these were and are standalone arguments. They're well-reasoned arguments made by Dr Pucci on topics that interested her at the time of publication and interest her today. There's another reason too. A scientific perspective on life is ever more needed in today's world. Read this collection to get a sense of the range of topics that may affect our present and future. If you have any doubt as to what I'm talking about, Dr Pucci is the one to explain the difference between science and technology. She's onto something, and this is important for all of us today. My favourites in this book are the writings on biologic. If I were to ask her who the giants of history, the history of science were, and I do ask her many times because it doesn't always sink in, she is consistent. She cannot complete a sentence without mentioning Charles Darwin. The importance of evolutionary biology is paramount, and the lines of argument on biologic help us understand this and apply it in ways that are unexpected. I'm only just beginning to see the light, you see. I now realise that scientists, like Mum, are like brave pilots who fly into unknown territory only with their wits and memories of their favourite scientists. They're independent, unfettered by shackles of conformity. It's no accident that we can learn from them. These ideas may come across, or their ideas may come across as alien or jarring at times, sometimes landing like bare metal. We should receive their messages with curiosity and make generous allowances. If a scientist's argument is not a soft landing for our ears, it may nonetheless be a remarkable feat. Remember when Charles Darwin presented to the Linnean Society in 1858? Apparently he was so nervous he was sick and missed his own presentation. Fortunately, we have Mum here tonight, which is not a given because she works very hard and pushes herself. Indeed, let's hope she tells us what she told the Qantas Bulletin when they awarded her with Businesswoman of the Year. The prize they gave her was a first-class travel around the world, including across the Atlantic on a Concorde. Yes, Mum, you are the one to read on science, and I say this as a recent convert. If your first reaction is to laugh at science, like an idiot, then take it from me, it is funny, and it has been fun to laugh, but we should now pick up the book, or the world will pass us by. We can, after all, in the words of my favourite mathematician, John Nash, become disillusioned with some of the illusions. Let's start to see the world as it really is. But even this is a challenge, given our imperfect lenses of perception and memory. Is that correct, Mum? All right, it's your turn. What are you waiting for? It's time for the main attraction. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Dr Pucci.
The beginning is in Pisa, where I had a very good time, except that we had a curfew. It was a pensione for girls, and we had a curfew at 8 p.m. So I had to study. I had to study a lot, also because the Foreign Affairs Ministry of Italy that gave me that fantastic scholarship demanded of me to do very well, that is to have in each and every exam at least 9 out of 10. So I had to do work. Then career, I found myself the little one there. I found myself on this book, which was commissioned by the National Library of Australia. And you might think, what did she do to gain that? 16 women out of thousands in Australia, and I was one of the 16. And the fact is that I had invented something in my head. In fact, I wanted to set up something that. So I visited the US because I wanted to talk with my international examiners in North America, and I did happen to be there in a very, very exciting time for the stock exchange in America. The new biotechnology, that is a biotechnology that was built around molecular biology and genetic engineering, was reaching the market. And it was such an incredible excitement at the time that impressed me enormously. And the business model in particular impressed me, the way they were doing things in the US. So I came to Australia and was very determined to actually do something about it. But I wasn't a molecular biologist, I wasn't a genetic engineer, and so I went to the UK to pick up a particular new technology, biotechnology, that a couple of Cambridge scientists had invented. Monoclonal antibodies. They were monospecific antibodies that were capable of being like a key in a lock and unlocking an enormous amount of things, both in diagnosing a disease but also in curing disease. It was a very exciting time, and I decided to apply the business model from the US to the particular technology. And also in the UK, I got the various personnel that had very few scientists at the time had that particular expertise, so I had to go to the UK to get them. And so they formed the kernel of the company. But obviously, to innovate, you need money. And I was able, through my husband and some Tuscan friends, who, apart from laughing, they were industrialists who made a lot of money. So I was able to convince one of these, after 18 months, to invest in my venture. Obviously, that money, the seed money, was able to build a beautiful laboratory and to recruit the personnel. So without further money, I went to the government and I said, well, we've done our bit, now it's your turn. And they came to the game, they really did. Fortunately, there was Barry Jones, Minister of Science, was John Button, Minister of Industry, and they were very, very positive, and they gave us the lifeline for the rest. And within 3 years, we had the particular product that was then licensed to the Japanese and gave us the go-ahead and the revenues. So you can see the laboratory, quite spacious, beautiful, I thought, and with state-of-the-art equipment. The people who were running it, and the collaboration that we were able to set up, because we were talking with the scientists, and the scientists needed a lot of reagents for their research, which they didn't have. So we see this is the reagent, the research reagents that we were making on commission for all those research institutions, so that they could, for instance, detect. They could detect. This is cancer of the lung. So they really could do a lot about it. And this is the signing of the agreement with the Japanese. The agreement are the Japanese are very sober, and you can see the picture there. But they're also symbolic. So they got out and they got an Australian flag together with the Japanese flag for the symbolism of the fund. After 10 years of that, and as Carolyn told you, there was the crash, and we had to sell the company to ICI Australia. I found myself, after a decade, in France. I was considered an analyst expert in biotechnology, and this place was the first technopolis in Europe. Started in the 60s, when I went there were the 90s, and there were 15,000 people working in it, 22 hectares of ground, half of it left green. It was an atmosphere that was absolutely fantastic. The project that I had devised was a database. The name was BETA, which is Base de données évolutives pour le transfert de technologies et l'exploitation de la recherche. In fact, it was a database that could be used for the transfer of technology. And it was ready for commercialization of research. Obviously the digital side of things wasn't my area, and there was an organization that was that documented research and could provide all the digital requirements. There was obviously the money coming from a pharmaceutical company, the branch of an Italian company called Zambon, and we did it. We did it, and it was quite successful, and it continues to this day. But Fred was getting married to an Australian, and I thought, pre-scientist, I thought, well, the future is there, so I better go back. And I found a job at the Garvan Institute of Medical Research as the Director of Business Development. And I did that for a number of years, traveling also to the United States and to Europe to get the pharmaceutical industrialists who could take up the research from the government. But the entrepreneurship bug was still there, and so I was persuaded to set up a second company, and listed by backdoor listing, and together with an investor and a professional chairman, Tom Hartigan. So we set up this company, listed, and our assets were 4 joint ventures, one of which with Carolyn, and another one with the Garvan Institute, another with the John Curtin School of Medical Research, and also the CSIRO. So we had these 4 joint ventures that the market believed in, because there were projects that were quite realistic, and we were going very well. We raised a lot of money, and we were doing well. But a couple of bandits, I call them cowboys, I'd say I call them the Boers bandits, the crooks, definitely the crooks. They managed through some acquisition of shares underhand, illegally, and then they just got rid of me and the chairman, and got all the money that we had. And they immediately decided not to go ahead with the research projects. So those monies that were committed to pay 2 million each to the researchers, they couldn't care less, and they told one of the leaders of the research, "Do you think that we did wrong? Well, prove it in a court of law. By then we'll be gone, and the money definitely will be gone." So we couldn't have anything to do with that. Anyway, this is one of the stories that I told in The Scientist. The Scientist is my first book, and I wrote about those crooks, of course changing their names because I didn't want to go to court. But the only satisfaction I got from there was that the Australian Financial Review, Trevor Sykes, wrote 3 articles, one after the other, for 3 weeks and told the story. And obviously he didn't fear the court cases, and none came. So that was one of the stories, Bourse Bandits. There are actually extracted in the current book. The other story, there are 2. The other story, I got inspiration from being on the corporate governance of an IVF company. And obviously the shortest is me. There are big men, big voices, and I was the biotech expert of that. And obviously there were some people from, in particular this one, from the top end of town, Macquarie Bank, and the others were gynecologists and accountants. And I got the inspiration for the only fiction that is in that book. Fiction, science fiction, of course, about some strange embryos that came up in that fertility clinic. By then, I was ready to stop and reflect. And but this is actually the first of the collection of articles that is in the book, because it goes back to 1990. At the time, Barry Jones was the head of the Commission for the Future. He was a minister, a science minister, but he also formed the Commission for the Future. And in their publication, they asked me, among various people, you can see there, Robin Williams, Barry Jones as well. Peter Garrett was at the time the Minister for the Environment, and authors, various famous people. And we were supposed to give our vision for the future, the 21st century. And I invented a word, two words, biologic, the logic of life. Taking it from evolution, of course. And I started thinking that evolution really was not the survival of the fittest, not at all. It was something much more positive than that. And it was the accumulation of value, of benefit to the species. And of course, the evolution comes through mutations, and mutation could be, depending on your beliefs, could be either by chance or by the hand of God, but it's there. The mutation is real. And only the mutations that confer a benefit to the species will be retained, not only retained, but also conserved for millions of years. That is the accumulation of value. And from that reflection, I started thinking that the logic of life is the best logic there is. And for instance, you can copy biological things. You can copy the eye of an insect, because that will give a lesson for those industrialists who want to build robots. The vision of insects is the best you can have. And also, of course, later on, the neural networks in the brain were taken as a model for artificial intelligence. all this derives from what I've just said. This is the second book, and the image is from Carolyn, who is here, and it's not a painting, it's actually a timber cutout at the front, and then there are other levels at the back for the background. It's a fantastic piece of art, and I was very fortunate to get it there. Actually, I forgot that in the scientist book, actually the art was by Janet Lawrence. Sorry, Janet, I forgot. The title is Devolution, and it means two things. The first one, it means that is going in the opposite direction of evolution. And remember, evolution is accruing value and benefit. Devolution is going in the opposite direction. But it also means that someone like the young self devolves the agency that it has, devolves it to the machines. And in that sense, it's a very, very grave happening that happens every time. But why did I choose the self, that is the character of the self? There is in immunology, the main thing that happens is the distinction between the self and non-self. And you attack only, the organism attack only the non-self. So the distinction between self and non-self is extremely important. And I reason that if it is a benefit, if it is a value, evolution would have selected also the self in other systems, not just the immune system. And in fact, the self in the brain has a very important role. Here are the conclusions. I mean, the book goes on and on and on. But if we go to the conclusion, the important part is that the self is a biological process. It's not a structure. It's a process that involves the whole of the brain. And the function is to manage the brain, to keep the organism balanced and coherent. The two things, balance and coherence, are the most important thing for a young self, a young person that grows up and builds the identity. The identity has to be balanced with the genetics and coherent with his own. That is a very, very important thing that we will see, that the action with machine, the interaction with machines alters that balance and that coherence. The brain obviously also forms mental images. It's not just the brain, it's not just the physical brain, it's also mental, it's also imagery, representation and imprint. And in this case, I asked Ugo Nardi, who is also here, to transfer this into an image. And the way that we expressed this image was the self is imprinted in the brain. And this is true. There are other consequences to devolution, and that is that something that you would know, that the development of the young self depends mostly on experiences. Everyone knows that. But the experiences involve mostly perception emotion, and memory. So these three functions are the cogs in the making of the self, because while a young brain intervenes and looks and smells the environment, there is perception involved there is emotion involved there, and what they remember of that remains. So these three cogs are essential. And the importance in terms of the technology is that if that perception, if that experience is mainly artificial, virtual, and with a machine, that is going to create an artificial sense of self, not a real one. And we've seen that social media, we've seen that there are a lot of problems with social media and with the fact that young people are hooked to social media. But also virtual reality and artificial intelligence. So I won't go into social media because we all know what damage it does. But with virtual reality, yes, this is another of Ugo's drawings. But what I mean by virtual reality is not just this, wearing a goggle, which you don't wear very often, but it is the virtual reality that is present in computer games. And computer games are very dangerous if you get addicted to it, because you go into another reality where the perception is altered. And there are a lot of young people who get hooked on computer games. So virtual reality is really a danger to the self in terms of that. So coming to my enemy, artificial intelligence. This is one of the images of artificial intelligence. They are networks that they've copied from the human brain. They are at the nano level, very, very small, and they are very, very fast. And they are nothing like the real brain, which is this. This is the real neural network and the intelligence with it. Can you see any relation with it? I don't. But if you go, in fact, to the very microscopic level, and you see the neurons, the actual neurons. By the way, in the previous picture, there are millions of these in the previous picture. And that previous picture is a very recent research on 1 cubic millimeters of brain of a mouse. Okay, so you can imagine what happens in the human brain. And the thing is that while the artificial intelligence that you see goes through an electric circuit, goes here and there. Here there are many, many different happenings that are not, absolutely not to compare. There is electricity through the brain, of course, but that's nothing. In the brain, there are in the synapses. The synapses links one neuron with the other. The synapsing, the point of juncture, is filled with self-batteries. These are the mitochondria that carry the energy for all things to happen. They don't need nuclear power, they don't need gas, they have it inside here. And then there are all these neurotransmitters, one different from the other, which give a different signal for different neurons, for different occasions, different signals with different doses. It can be serotonin, it can be dopamine, it can be GABA and all that. And there are the signals that come through. They're not just the electrical. The electrical are here, just a little bit here. All the rest, all the major rest, is other than electrical. Now, I've written quite a few things about artificial neural networks, and I'd like to read for you just one paragraph. I wrote this article about 6 months ago, and I was saying, the problem is the current status of AI. It's considered the most advanced tool one can use. If you're a scientist and you don't use that tool, you're not a scientist today. So, a creative human mind, instead of using imagination, original perception, and new solutions, that human mind has to concentrate on the competing speed and color of AI. Distracted in this way, human creativity will be stunted, preoccupied, and losing ground. So, when futurist historians predict the takeover of machines over humans, they will have to refer to a slowing of the human mind, to the deterioration of the human mind, not to the advance of thinking machines. In another sense, I also criticize AI in these terms. My particular field, monoclonal antibodies, constituted a major leap in technology at the time. And a lot of questions were asked before it could be applied safely. Transparency was and is paramount. It was monitored in human research ethics committees. It was scrutinized by opposite regulatory agencies before the products reached the market. AI products are on the market now, without anything like that. So I built some sort of public good parallel view between two different technologies. I'm talking about ethical in the sense of in the public good. And I rank them from very good, from 2 is a very good level of public good, very good high ethical. 1 is so and so, and 0 is none at all. So I classify the two technologies, radioactive and digital. And in the radioactive technology, the good ones are diagnostics and therapeutics. You can actually do good, public good with them. But, for instance, in power generation, it's good in terms of not having gas, ecological damage, but then contamination and waste, etc. And of course, it's as weapons, it's definitely not good. In terms of digital technologies, the internet I consider positive, communication, information, learning tools, remedial health, I consider that to be very positive, and in telehealth. In the social media, virtual reality, augmented reality, and artificial intelligence, some good and some bad, because connectedness is good. AI is very good at computational and the management of data. That's where AI should go, just there. But all the damages of anxiety, delusion, depression, and especially the derailment of self is not in the public good. And the rest, the hacking, of course, is terrible. But this is the last part. A very recent paper came up with the measure of thought, human thought. And the promoters of AI were very, very happy because, look, it's only 10 bits per second. What do you do with 10 bits a second? The microchip processing is up to 1 billion bits per second. Can you imagine to compare that? But human sensory processing is actually about that, because it is 100 million times the speed of thought. That is, the brain has two parts. One part is very, very slow, the thinking part is very, very slow. But the other is comparable to the speed of the microchips. The sensor, the reception, the perception is very, very fast. And in fact, the sound, smell, sights, etc., they can be processed by perception at the same time, in parallel. So it's comparable to the current graphic processing unit, which is that speed and in parallel, many things. But I'll show you why it doesn't work for the thought. If you see here, perception has this. Perception has the same speed and parallel multiple processing than AI. So evolution did know that. We had that. Why didn't he use it for thinking? Because AI, as well as the perception here, is in the broth of the unconscious. Remember, the AI is unconscious. While when we move to the conscious and we move to knowing our feelings, we can represent in our brain things that we've seen. We can recall memory. We can have executive functions. We know what happens down there. We have abstract thoughts. We have will. We have imagination, and that's the beautiful distillation of our thought. There is imagination, creativity, art, and discovery. That's why the thought is so slow, because it's so complex, it's so thoughtful that it can't go very fast. Let them stay in the broth of the unconscious. So when I see the brain, and this is the last, and the last from Hugo. When I see this, I am tempted to go back to a light musical title by Prince or Nothing Compares to You. Thank you. I wanted to thank you. I wanted to thank you for your goodwill. I wanted to thank the artists of this, Jimmy, Ugo, Janet, Chiara. Do you want to come up? Jimmy, Ugo, Chiara, and Janet. Come on, Janet, come on. They were the collaborators. They were those who went through the whole process of sublimation. So, thank you. Thank you to the Consul General and to the Institute and to the very good organization of the President and her team. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alex. That was wonderful.
Tu sei una donna emigrata che ha contribuito in Australia nella ricerca medica. È stato un percorso a ostacoli come donna e come emigrata?
Francamente no. Io ho trovato il modo di progredire, di fare le cose e non ho avuto una grande difficoltà. Inizialmente, io avevo 2 lauree, inizialmente non me le riconoscevano e quindi ho fatto un PhD. E se vuoi pensare che quello, non avendolo riconosciuto, in fondo è un ostacolo. Invece io lo considero un fatto positivo perché mi ha indotto ad andare più in là. E quindi io non l'ho sofferta per niente.
Nel tuo libro hai tracciato il tuo percorso di vita da scienziata a imprenditrice, consulente governativa e scrittrice. Oggi a quale di questi percorsi sei più legata?
Io ora sono una scrittrice.
Come mai questo?
Ma è una cosa che ho nel sangue perché mio padre era uno scrittore, un giornalista ed è una cosa che mi riesce naturale, raccontare. E poi mi piace scrivere. Quando scrivo io sono felice.
E gli argomenti da te trattati nel libro ruotano attorno a innovazione e tecnologia, compresi i social media. Quali i pro e i contro di queste innovazioni tecnologiche?
Ci sono delle cose molto negative quando la tecnologia affronta la persona invece di aiutarla. Cioè, secondo me l'uomo, le donne, i bambini dovrebbero considerare la tecnologia come dei tools, come delle forchette, come dei tools. Invece questi promotori delle tecnologie, che sono molto potenti, loro vogliono essere dentro la tua vita in tutti i modi. Quindi il problema è il potere che hanno i giganti della tecnologia. Non è la tecnologia stessa, è quanto questi giganti vogliono imporcela e che sia un fatto completamente dentro la nostra vita e che non dovrebbe essere.
E tu ti sei messa anche contro queste,
Senz'altro.
quali i pro e quali i contro di queste innovazioni tecnologiche?
Il contro è che ti entrano nella tua vita, prendono le tue azioni e ti rendono schiavo della tecnologia. Questo è il contro. Poi, siccome sono degli strumenti, sono anche utili per esempio per fare dei conti, per fare la gestione dei dati, sono utili a fare quello, ma in questo momento noi stiamo andando verso un grande pericolo che noi ci sminuiamo perché diamo troppa importanza alla tecnologia.
E le innovazioni tecnologiche riguardano anche quelle della salute, che sono fondamentali per la diagnosi e gli interventi. Ci sono degli aspetti negativi di questa tecnologia sulla questione dell'applicazione?
No, se sono applicati bene non ci sono problemi. Si sono applicati perché nel caso della salute ci sono delle salvaguardie, no? Le salvaguardie che dicono che se un certo strumento è dannoso non lo puoi usare, che se una certa medicina è dannosa non la puoi usare. Quindi nel campo della salute non vedo le tecnologie sono buone e aiutano.
E si parla molto di intelligenza artificiale in questi giorni. È un pericolo a cui che dobbiamo arginare subito? Sì. E perché?
Dobbiamo arginare subito perché ci sta prendendo alla gola, ci sta togliendo le nostre funzioni ed è un grosso pericolo che ci rende degli zombie e fa tutto la macchina.